trauma is a huge disconnect. And to heal from it, we need a fundamental connection. I've had an incredible life and I feel so blessed. I feel like I'm still here for a reason. I had 2 suicide attempts, the husband who tried to kill me, other abuses, but for, what I call earth angels, including my friends and just random people, who show you that there's humanity out there. They have believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. They deflate me when I'm super crazed and they inflate me when I'm sad. And, we all need that, whether it's friends or family or animals or nature or an inspirational book. Like, we need that.
Hello and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Sophia Elan. And she is an author, among many other things you were sharing before we started the recording. But her most recent book is Roar, Self-Heal Trauma for Health, Happiness, and Harmony. And what's really cool is you have additional self-help books. I made a note of this because I wanted the listeners to know. But you have additional self-help books on managing stress, enhancing brain health, and achieving a healthy weight. That's awesome. So welcome, Sophia.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for being here. And I know you're going to share some of your story, and I want to thank you for that. It's not an easy thing to do, but I know the listeners will be able to connect with so much that we'll be sharing. So why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
It's funny, anyone who's experienced trauma, that question itself can sometimes be triggering, right? Because we're not used to talking about ourselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of people start off with what they do. Whenever I'm asked about my life or who I am, I like to say I've lived and I've loved. The first half of my life was basically living on behalf of others, the consummate subjugator, people pleaser. And I have a heart that bursts with love. And I was bestowing that on everyone throughout my life, except for myself. And so the second half of my life, I am more focused on living for myself, living authentically, with, my purpose and my passions, and really cultivating that sense of self-love, self-respect, self-worth. And so now, as you mentioned, I'm an author across genres. I have the memoir, which I like to think about it as an uplifting recounting of some dark moments in my life, as opposed to a book about abuses. And then when I was researching for my own healing and writing that book, I really appreciated how intimately aware I was of how devastating the impacts of chronic stress are, which was from my unresolved trauma. I had been misdiagnosed my entire life with various things from rheumatoid arthritis to multiple sclerosis, and it was all psychosomatic. And so once I really appreciated that impact that was having on me, that catapulted me to writing those holistic wellness guides, which I have an under an umbrella, KISS, Keep It Simple, Sweetheart, because I want holistic wellness to be accessible to everybody. And then I had a friend send me an article, I think it was in The Guardian, and someone had asked AI, tell me the plot of an Oscar-winning movie. And my friend said, this is basically your life. And so that caused me to start writing a novel series. So it's a Mediterranean-based novel series, and it's based on my life, and it's kind of my healing journey, and a romance story and a love story, including like love of friendships and love for myself in a more entertaining, because my memoir is pretty raw and vulnerable. So it's in a more entertaining and lightning manner. And, when I said that most people, when you ask them to tell you about themselves, they start with whatever their job is. And historically, I would have done that. And now I'm proud to say that what I'm doing now as an author and holistic wellness coach, it's because it does reflect who I am. But traditionally, I had been a lawyer. I did that for a couple of decades. And it was only recently, when I was a child, I wanted to be a teacher or a psychologist, which in a way, I'm kind of like pseudo doing that now through my work. And yet I was like, okay, how did I want to do that? And then ended up becoming a lawyer. And my sister, who's 2 years older than I am, she was going to go to law school. And that made my parents very proud, especially my dad. And she quit college in her first semester. And so that disappointed my dad. And so I was like, well, of course I need to be a lawyer. And so I went down that path that really wasn't my path, but I didn't realize it at the time. And then I married my college boyfriend, he had the lovely combination of being both materialistic and not ambitious. And so he was very happy that I was a lawyer because of the financial rewards with that.
Sure.
And we had a business and we sold it. And had always wanted to work for a not-for-profit. I wanted to have children. And he said, that I should continue working at my job because he thought I wouldn't make as much money in a not-for-profit situation. And that he would stay at home to watch the kids, that he didn't even want kids. And I'm like, no. So that finally got me to say, okay, enough is enough. And we've been married for like 15 years. And so I separated, and his response was to try to kill me. And he secretly filed for divorce because he wanted to have the strategic upper hand, even though he didn't want to be divorced. And he sought permanent alimony. And I'm like, okay, I'm out of here. Just a visceral reaction to that situation and the materialism and everything else. So originally I moved to Argentina, and I traveled there a lot with one of my jobs for mergers and acquisitions, and I just fall in love with the culture. So I went there and, I felt very happy. I started pursuing my passions, travel, as well as holistic wellness. I got a master's in natural health and different certifications in nutrition and fitness, etc. I ended up in the Mediterranean, and I was writing a book on Mediterranean lifestyle and holistic wellness. And I was really struggling to finish it. And I realized it was because I'm like, who's going to want to read anything that I have to say? And I was just kind of biding time, and then COVID struck, and I think, that impacted all of us in various ways. And I no longer had the benefit of my distractions, because before I was about to go to Italy and I wasn't able to. I was living in Turkey, which I absolutely positively love. I've been based there, for several years. But I was restless and I wanted to move. I normally numbed myself with, relationships and different distractions, and we were quarantined, so I didn't have that. So I was alone with my thoughts.
Oof. Yep.
And I was
so many of us.
Yeah. And so I felt hypocritical writing this book about holistic wellness as I was preaching what I practice, and most of the lifestyle factors, like diet and exercise, et cetera, check. And I was exercising one morning, hungover, in this small studio, and my wine glass from the night before, a few feet from me, shattered. And I was like, oh, someone's trying to get my attention.
Yeah.
So I started turning inwards, and, I was left to process my thoughts. And that started me down my healing journey. I had gone to conventional psychotherapy a couple times before. And again, I'm like, check, I'm all good. Let's move on. And
yeah, I know that
realized
one.
I was biding my time and not feeling like I had a whole lot of self-worth. So I started delving into how to heal. And my first big aha moment was that our subconscious basically is operating, everything, 95% of what we do.
Yep.
And so I realized that I needed to delve deep into my beliefs and thoughts, which were dictating my behavior, which was puzzling to me and to everyone else around me. So that started me down the journey. And then, that's what led me to doing the holistic wellness guides, because again, I can completely understand how, if those things are unresolved, how they impact us, our behaviors, and our physiology, quite frankly.
Right. So it's okay. So one of the things you haven't mentioned is, did you come from trauma? Because it sounds like you did. And because I know one question that's asked often of me is, if left unhealed, will unresolved trauma, will you go into if left unhealed, will you end up in a domestic violence relationship? And yes.
And, it's funny because when my husband tried to kill me, I was like, okay, stuff happens, c'est la vie. And again, I was married for 15 years. This wasn't, a couple months or something.
Right.
And, one of my high school friends, who is my best friend to this day, he's like, you're not appreciating the gravity of the situation. So I went to therapy at his assistance. I was basically just trying to pacify him. And it took a number of sessions until I realized that, I had the childhood abuse that I had been repressing. And I mean, I had, when my husband tried to kill me, my dad called me that day. And I said, you know what? I'm sorry. I can't talk. I had a bad night. He's like, I know. My ex had called him preemptively and told him he tried to kill me. And
Good
my dad's
God.
first words to me were, what the hell are you doing? Which I'd also tried to commit suicide in high school. And those were it just rings clear to me like no one's business. My dad said, what the hell are you doing? When he found that I had overdosed. And so I had been unaware of that all that time. And, I'm the model I had been blissfully ignorant for all those years. I was always happy, but I realized I wasn't at peace. And so that therapy is what started a journey of coming to terms with what had happened to me. And then the realization, which was super important, was that I was self-perpetuating abuse throughout my life through the disrespectful relationships, abusive relationships, numbing behaviors, not having followed my dreams, my authenticity, not having, self-esteem, etc. So
I was going to say there was some people pleasing too, because would you say you went to law school because you could see that it pleased your parents?
It pleased my parents. And then, my first husband wanted that ongoing.
Sure.
I mean, I wanted children and I wanted to work for a not-for-profit. It's ludicrous to me now, articulating these things that I was living my life for other people. So yeah, consummate people pleaser.
Yeah, that I think we realize, and it just becomes such a habit of ours and we don't even realize it. And I had to really slow myself down and to break that habit of looking at why I do things. The motivation behind why I'm going to go do this particular thing for this person, and really analyze that, because I definitely, and I used to be so proud of calling myself a chameleon too, which means I could become who I think you think I want, who I think you want me to be.
Yeah.
And so I was never myself. I was never authentic. I didn't even know how to be authentic.
Yeah, because we don't even ask ourselves what we want because it's not uppermost in our minds, which is in the abstract, it's crazy. Like say that I was Pinocchio. I let people pull my strings all my life. And then, when they were done toying with me, cast me aside, put me back on the shelf. They were done playing with me. I got married again. And that husband, after several years of supporting him and his family, etc., he started being financially okay. I mean, I was taught as a child that love is conditional. I was taught that, with my father, and then I was taught that my mother modeled self-sacrifice. And I don't think people realize, a lot of people objectively who don't understand our behavior, things that they see as red flags can be like flashing green flags to us. For instance, my dad was so jealous that my mom used to sing me the song, "You Are My Sunshine." And she had to stop because it upset my dad. I mean, fundamentally jealous. And so when I would have boyfriends who were really jealous, that was love to me. I would have friends who would be like, oh my God, this is not a healthy situation. I'm like, it never even entered my mind that there was anything wrong.
It was your normal.
Yep.
It was your
exactly.
normal.
Exactly. And how else are we supposed to, this is what's modeled to us as children. And we have deep programming.
Hey, thank you for listening so far. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you won't ever miss an episode. Yeah, that's the thing. And we go up into our adult life, and that's what's so crazy is when we're doing this stuff, and to us it's normal, and other people looking at us, and thank God you had the friend that you had in your life that, pretty much got in your face and said, look, you need help, and you listened.
Yes, and what I attribute to, trauma is a huge disconnect. And to heal from it, we need a fundamental connection. And I've been, I've had an incredible life, and I feel so blessed. I feel like I'm still here for a reason. I had 2 suicide attempts, the husband who tried to kill me, other abuses, but for, what I call earth angels, including my friends and just random people, who show you that there's humanity out there. They have believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. They deflate me when I'm super crazed, and they inflate me when I'm sad. And, we all need that, whether it's friends or family or animals or nature or an inspirational book. Like, we need that. And I think that, I had always been looking for love and intimacy and support in romantic relationships. And I think that, especially those of us who have been through trauma, we need to expand our conception of intimacy to realize that, there are good people out there, but those of us who are traumatized, we're so used to the familiar that we tend to repeat the same
Correct.
patterns and the same relationships. And, a lot of people will get jaded and think all people are bad, or, all men are bad,
Yeah.
or whatever. And it's, like
Right.
I have the best male friends and my brothers, and, people who are just shining examples of love. And so we have to realize that we're accountable, as Carl Jung says, who is like a huge hero of mine. We're not what happened to us, we are what we've become. And when we're traumatized, if we aren't healing, we're always filtering everything, through our misperceptions, if you will.
Right.
And that
Right.
can lead to bad relationships, undesirable behavior, etc.
Yeah, you're hitting on so many notes on that. That's so true. It's it definitely changes our perception. I talk about, our trauma, our unhealed trauma puts
Yes.
filters over our
Mm-hmm.
eyes, and that's the way we see the world. And that's something that, people who are with people like us, that, I'll call them the normal people, I guess, or whatever, the untraumatized people. That's one thing they need to understand. And my husband and I had a conversation the other night. It was interesting. We were watching something on TV, and there was a lady on there, and she was sharing her story. And she said this, I don't remember what it was she said, but I remember when she said it, and my husband went, I knew why she said it. I got it right
Yeah.
away. I actually expected that answer to come out of her mouth, or that statement. And I paused it and I said, hang on a second. I said, I want to explain something to you. And then I explained it to him. He's like, wow, I didn't even see that at all. And it was this woman that was in a narcissistic relationship. She was the empath. He was a narcissist. And just her mindset was still in that place of a lot of unhealed trauma. And so the
Mm-hmm.
stuff coming out of her mouth, like I totally understood exactly where she was coming from. But my husband's like, ugh, I don't get it. But then when I explained it to him, he goes, that makes sense, unfortunately. But
Yeah,
that's the thing that's so hard.
I don't think that a lot of people understand the trauma psyche. And, one of the reasons why, I'm a complete introvert. And the only reason why, like, I wrote the memoir and I'm speaking about this stuff is because I really do want people, to understand that they're not alone. And I always say that healing doesn't happen in silence or solitude. And not only for the people who have been through the trauma, but those who love us, who are trying to
Yeah.
help, they don't understand
Yeah.
the trauma psyche. And your brain at the most formative years, especially if you've had childhood trauma, literally functionally and structurally has changed.
Yes.
And you
Oh,
need
yeah.
to rewire your brain. And,
Yes.
when you're in survival mode, you're acting from a space that, nothing matters but survival. And the
Right.
things that served us as children no longer serve us as adults. And if we don't get that
Correct.
awareness, and that insight, we're just going to continue to have those habits that don't serve us or the people, we love and who love us.
Right. I know, I lived in survival mode for years, and, you just don't have the brain space to do anything except to sometimes get to the next breath, the next
Yes.
moment, the next crisis.
Yeah, we're not in
You,
our cortex. We're not in our thinking executive,
no.
brain. We're in our primal survival mode. We're familiar, even if it's hell. Our
Yeah.
brains like
Yeah.
to conserve resources. They like what's predictable. And so that keeps us in that same pattern. Like, you're kind of addicted to stress, which objectively
Yes.
you're like, no, I'm not. But yes,
Yes.
you are.
Yeah.
If you're modeling your behavior after what was set up, especially early on as a pattern, we're in that cycle and we don't even realize it because it's normal.
Yeah. And then when you realize it, because I can remember starting to realize about the cycles and seeing the cycles in my life, but standing there and going through the cycles and not understanding why I'm doing that,
Right.
and not understanding how to get around it.
Right. There's I have it throughout my book. Like, stop asking the clowns why they're clowns. Ask yourself why you go to the circus.
Ah,
Or there's
woo.
the quote about, I don't know if it's that strength is getting knocked down 7 times and getting up 8 times. And I'm like, you know what? I realized, okay, yeah, I always prided myself on being resilient and optimistic, but I'm like, I have the power within me to stop getting knocked down. I'm putting
Yeah.
myself in these positions. I'm not a
Right.
5-year-old child anymore. I
Right.
can deal with this from a different reality. But if you don't realize that, and like you said, if you don't understand the why, so I had repressed and suppressed all my life, and when I realized that I was biding time and I wasn't happy with the way I was going through my day to day, I realized why repression wasn't working anymore. And then I was like, okay, great. I know why I have to heal now. Now, how? How do I heal?
Right.
It's not like, grief where you have like this, multi-step process and it's kind
There's
of
an outline in
explained.
front of you. There's different steps you need to take.
Right. So I'm like, okay, I'm all in now. What do I do? So it takes a lot of self-awareness. And I think, I had done some conventional psychotherapy a couple of times and I thought, okay, that's good. I'm done. That's it. But to me, all healing is self-healing. And to really heal, you need deep introspection and self-awareness. And, it's a daily practice. So going to therapy once a month or whatever. I mean, and again, everyone needs their outlet. Like I found it more in friends and whatnot. So everyone does need an outlet. They do need to tell their story because I think the scariest thing is if you think that there's something, trauma so often is taboo. And if you think that there's something so scary that you can't talk about it, that's not a path to healing,
No, that's going to keep you stuck. That's definitely going to keep you stuck. Did you actually go to any kind of trauma therapy or did you specifically?
I did psychotherapy for a couple times, and like I said, when the therapist would try to talk about my childhood, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Although when I was growing up, I always said, I have such low self-esteem. It's as if I were abused, not realizing.
Oh, so you didn't realize you were abused?
No, it wasn't until I started having flashbacks when I was going to therapy after my husband tried to kill me. Which again, I only did that because my friend insisted that I do that.
Okay, and then, that's a big missing link. I didn't realize that. Oh my goodness.
Oh yes, okay. It was quite quite far along. But I did the psychotherapy for a few sessions, and it was more like just checking off a list. One thing that really did help me was craniosacral therapy, and that I try to make everything I suggest accessible to everybody, which is one of the things that I struggle with traditional psychotherapy because, it's expensive. And if people need it, some people are in it for years. And so I have a lot of, different suggestions and modalities that anyone can do for free, or even like, resources that are, YouTube or, ebooks for 99 cents. I basically self-healed. But craniosacral therapy actually, because I had embodied my trauma. When we repress, I think we kind of think like, the trauma's gone and it's just buried deep and it's impacting us. I've been misdiagnosed with so many illnesses. I was living inauthentically. I had ill-advised behavior. It was in my life every day without me realizing it. And the craniosacral therapy actually helped me find my voice and also segregate my childhood from my adulthood, to where I could start to integrate my past with my present so that it was no longer I was no longer imprisoned or shackled by it. It was the starting point for letting me have it more of a scar than an open bleeding wound. And finding my voice.
That's a big one. Finding your voice is huge. That's huge. So this all happened. All this started to come out after your first husband tried to kill you.
Right.
So how old were you when that happened?
So that was, I was just about to turn 40.
See, there you go. You go. What did I say earlier? That statistic.
Yes.
Is that not crazy?
Yes. Yes.
So the statistic, I said it several times. I'll say it because we were talking about this before the recording, and I've shared this statistic quite often, but it's astounding that on average, women who are sexually abused are sexually abused between the ages of 13 and 17, and then they don't share that story for 4 decades. And it's not just sexual abuse, so like I was saying before, because I know I kept my mouth shut. I was not sexually abused, but I kept my mouth shut, and the many, many, many women I have worked with, same thing. And I know it to be true for men too.
And I think, not only is there, unfortunately, a taboo, which I think we're all trying to dismantle about talking about stuff, but also, especially if it's childhood abuse, and it's usually someone, in your household, someone that you love, someone who's your caretaker.
Trust.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you have no one to confide in. It's scary. And unfortunately, we carry that inability to cope with it. We repress it, we disassociate, and we carry that into adulthood, not realizing that we are perpetuating that abuse because, we have these beliefs and thoughts programmed into our heads as children, and we're still operating off of those.
Sure. And behaving the same way and reacting the same way, especially when we get triggered. Because when we get triggered, it's over the top. It's over the top.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I'm a queen of, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, cycle through them all.
I'm a professional.
And again, I had so many psychosomatic illnesses. And so the body's like, hey, there's symptoms, anxiety. So many things are symptoms of that unresolved trauma.
Correct.
I was a lifelong insomniac. Honestly, I still struggle with it to this day. Mm-hmm. And I never people would call them horrific nightmares. I always called them dreams because deep down somewhere intuitively, I knew that they were trying to tell me messages. And those dreams stopped once I started, trying to accept what had happened and process it. Oh,
really?
Yes. Dreams fascinate me.
That's profound. Yeah, yes. There's a lot to be said about dreams. I had a sleep specialist on that podcast will be coming out pretty soon, and it's fascinating. And he talks about that and how important the dreams are.
Well, and I think there's no greater example of how our subconscious, is running the show, even when we consciously think otherwise. Because I would have these really, really, again, I would call them dreams, not nightmares, very violent dreams, and I'm like, I feel completely safe. Why am I having these dreams? Well, my husband tried to kill me, I had other relationships with huge physical. So consciously I felt okay, but subconsciously
your body was.
Yes.
It did not feel safe. Exactly.
And that's to me, it's such a great, again, it's a symptom, just like if we have physical issues, of a physical condition we need to take care of. If you have things that you're not processing, mentally, emotionally, your body, God bless, is going to keep knocking on that door until you pay attention to it.
This is a great example of what happens when you listen to your body, that your body's going to give you messages in all different kinds of ways. It could be dreams. It could be pain in your body. It could be flashbacks. There's so many different ways, but I know for me, I so disassociated with my body that's why I've had to have so many surgeries on my body, because I didn't listen to it. And I was always very active. I worked out and stuff, even though my weight fluctuated, which probably didn't help the situation. But I tore myself up because I didn't, I had like big surgeries. Like I had a torn rotator cuff and I didn't even know it.
Yeah, I mean,
that's supposed to be super painful. Now, the surgery was very painful, but beforehand, I wasn't in that much pain. It was really bizarre.
Yeah, I was told that I needed back surgery. Apparently, I have a herniated disc, and I could barely walk, and I exercise too. I was told that my nerve was dying. I absolutely had to have surgery. Ooh. And there's nothing wrong with me, nothing. And I think that's why I'm like almost on a bullhorn about, I've expanded it beyond unresolved trauma to chronic stress. And I had that also, occupationally. And I don't think there's anyone who doesn't experience that. Like 85% plus of office visits, they have a stress component to it, but no one's treating the stress, like you're getting a pill for your anxiety disorder and your digestive disorder, even though mood disorders and digestive disorders coexist, etc. People aren't, going to the underlying root of it. And, stress is a contributory, if not causative factor of, most chronic degenerative diseases. One of the things I'm doing now, I'm doing wellness coaching, and it's not only chronic stress, which again, is from the unresolved trauma, as well as cardiovascular awareness, because cardiovascular disease remains the number one killer. And in my opinion, chronic stress amplifies all of the major risk factors, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high blood cholesterol, and then behavioral things like, smoking, overeating, not exercising, etc. Stress, I think, is literally and figuratively killing us as a society, and we're dismissive of it. And we have to stop dismissing it, because 90% of cardiovascular disease is preventable. And, I want people to be empowered. I want them to be educated and empowered and know that this is not inevitable, from aging or whatever it is. I think a lot of us need to start realizing the mind-body connection, and we can use our minds to heal our bodies, and vice versa.
Yeah. I think that the sneaky thing about stress is it sneaks up on you. And I think you're
Hmm.
right. I think we do need to be educated more about the effects of stress because it's just it's become kind of this, well, I'm just stressed. I'm just
Right.
stressed, and it's acceptable.
Sometimes
And
it's a badge of honor.
true. That's so true.
Sleep
And
deprivation too.
yeah, and the thing is, stress over time, by the time you start feeling it in your body,
Yes,
there's damage being done. There's absolutely damage being done. And,
absolutely.
I didn't mention this earlier, but you've been touching on, like, you've had some misdiagnosis. The other thing, and I think you're aware of this, but there is autoimmune diseases that come from the trauma that we've been through.
No
And we
surprise at
can
all to me.
also heal from those autoimmune diseases. You hear so many times that I don't know why this person, I don't know where this comes from, fibromyalgia. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know where, it comes from stress. That's something that I literally pray that our doctors, our Western doctors, will start asking more about our history of growing up, finding out about trauma, because I bet there'd be a lot less prescriptions written if our doctors were aware of that and treated
Yeah, trauma
that
informed.
instead of the symptoms. Let's treat the root cause.
Even things like, a lot of society, there's a lot of vanity, and people are worried about wrinkles and taking all these collagen supplements, etc. Chronic stress not only degrades the collagen we have, but it also
Oh,
impedes collagen production. And collagen's not just about wrinkles in your face. It's in your
no.
arteries, it's your eyes,
Yeah.
it's your joints. So it's like no
Yeah.
wonder to me. I don't really come across many people who don't say they're exhausted and stressed. And I'm like, it doesn't have
And
to be
hurt.
this way. Yes,
And
yes,
hurt. A lot of
yes.
pain. See, and that's another thing is people may not realize the pain that you're walking around every day is not normal. We're not supposed to walk around in pain all the time. And the chronic stress and unresolved trauma can cause pain in our bodies, especially in our joints.
Yes, I mean, emotionally, psychologically, physiologically, I can have my saddest days and I'm still a happy person. And
Right.
I've been living in other countries pretty much for the past couple of decades. And I'll tell you, in the United States, and I think it's getting worse. People are more, divisive, and there's discord, and
Oh yeah.
it's not harmonious. And I was blessed to be exposed to different cultures. I come back to the United States, and I feel the stress from people that
Oh, I'm sure.
who don't really even, they wouldn't even tell you they have a objective reason to be stressed. And I'm like, oh my god, you don't realize what you're doing to yourself.
Yeah.
And like, again, I had struggled with sleep all the time, and then once I started researching, I'm like, oh my god, I need to sleep, so I need to tackle this, because I don't want it to just be a c'est la vie. This is the path I'm going down. It's very empowering. And there's so much conflicting information out there, and social media with influencers, it drives me nuts, because
Yeah,
people
there's
without credentials or qualifications
yes.
or relevant experience, and
Hmm.
if people would just start reading again, I mean,
Yeah.
use common sense, which isn't common,
No.
unfortunately. I mean,
Yeah.
don't outsource your health to anyone, your mental health, your
No.
physical health.
No, yeah, and we need to take our mental health just as much of a priority as our physical health, and that's another thing that, the medical industry needs. We need to have more access to mental health. We need to have people should be able to afford to go get trauma therapy. We shouldn't be struggling with that. We shouldn't have so many people struggling trying to figure it out on their own. Fortunately, there is a lot more great information out there, and there are modalities and ways that you can kind of work if you can't afford it.
Yes.
But I think it's heartbreaking because I think you and I both can see that a lot of problems would be resolved if we had proper trauma therapy available to everyone. Hey, if you're ready to go deeper in your healing journey, join our 6-week workshop. Sign up today at women's childhood abuse healing workshop.com or click on the link below. I'd love to see you there and help you on your healing journey.
Yes. And, I mean, I think I'm constantly kind of complaining about social media being antisocial, like disconnecting instead of connecting. But things
Yes.
like, what you do with your group, like, having people have a place where people can be, understood and seen and heard, at a value, YouTube videos for free. Carl Jung, I mean, they're doing artificial intelligence to, explain his philosophies and his psychology, and they are deeply impactful. I mean, again, I had a couple of psychotherapy sessions, and I definitely loved the craniosacral, but basically I did everything for free. A couple ebooks or whatever, but
Right.
$10 or whatever.
Right.
And that's the thing too. I want the people who need it the most, the conventional therapies are the ones that usually aren't available. And then, you have other people going to, Xanax and Valium and drugs. And,
Yes.
I'm all about herbal remedies and therapies. And I had been on some of those things for a while, and Lexapro, and I felt like my brain was sloshing around. And
Yeah.
I hated it because I have such a zest for life. And for that short period of time when I was doing that, I just was apathetic. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't care to live life like this, because it not only numbs your pain, it numbs your pleasure. And thanks, but no thanks. I don't want
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's just so many side effects. And, I've said for me, I try to avoid taking any medication.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not against it, but
Mm-hmm.
for me, I have such severe side effects to everything that
Mm-hmm.
I just try to avoid it at all costs. And there was a time, I'll share that I had to be on medication. It was when my first husband and I were going through our separation, and I did not do well. And I got to a point where I had my family telling me, you need to go to the doctor. I mean, I was like, I would drive to an appointment and not even remember driving there,
Yeah.
crying, and there was this shame of, why can't I just suck it up, buttercup? And, I've done that all
Mm-hmm.
my life. Why can't I do it here? There was just that mentality. And I finally succumb to it because I didn't want, my thing was, it wasn't that I was worried about me. I was worried about me affecting everybody else. So that's why I
Mm-hmm.
went to the doctor at the time, and it did help me. And I was on medication for a few months. It was just like this period of time. I just needed some help.
Yes. Yes.
And
And
there's nothing wrong with that.
correct. And I absolutely did that. My second husband abandoned me. I guess technically you can't be abandoned as an adult, but kind of abandoned me. And I had like bursitis in both arms. I was crushed. And again, I just wasn't myself. And,
Yeah.
so I was like begging for Xanax, just begging for it. Cause I'm like, I can't sleep and I know I need to sleep, so
Yeah.
I do agree. I'm not judging or faulting anyone for
No,
doing that, but it
no.
can't be your lifelong solution.
It's not the
Because
solution if you haven't done the trauma work. Do
right.
the trauma work, then you won't, the chances of you needing any
Right.
medication
Or
is
like, valerian is like nature's Valium. There are a lot of herbal remedies. Like I
sure.
swear by kava tea. Like I can't go without kava tea. When I'm out of the country and I'm out of it, like I have people ship it to me. Like I need my passport and my kava tea. So there are so many and essential oils. I mean, there's so many things that can
Let's
really
t-
help us.
let's talk about that because I think that would be a really great topic right now. If you want to share a little more about some of your natural remedies that you do that have helped you, because
Yeah.
I'd like to know too.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, tea. And it's funny because I don't really even like tea, but I'll have like a cocktail of teas all day long because I know how much they help me with sleep, with stress, etc.
Right.
And essential oils. And, oftentimes you can get these things as oils or teas, but aromatherapy is awesome because, like literally you smell something, it's going to the olfactory nerve. Like it's
Yep.
immediate. And, I would use different blends or things like, chamomile, lemon balm. They, again, like tried and true. I'm talking about at my saddest, lowest moments, immediately impact me and change me. The teas are an absolute must. Movement is an absolute must for
Yes.
me.
Yes. Me too.
And I think that
I even
people,
have I even use a vibration plate. Have you done that?
no, I haven't.
Ah, it's really cool. Some people like them, and some people, I love it. And it actually does help get the trauma out of your system as well, out of your body.
Yeah, which is a great, like instead of repressing it or distracting yourself from it, it's actually having, healing. I'm big into grounding, like having my
Yes.
feet touch the earth.
Yes.
Even like, I think a lot of us probably have comfort from like, rhythmic movements, whether it's like a
Yes.
rocking chair or
Oh,
listening to
yeah.
waves. And, I sleep with a sound machine with ocean
Mm-hmm.
waves. It's those little things. You think about animals when they're hurt, they literally shake it off. And I think it's like 90 seconds. If you have something traumatic happen, the physiological process, the duration is about 90 seconds,
Yes.
unless we take it to our brains and we start ruminating. which is what most of us do. So even like that shaking it off, through movement or whatever.
Right.
Music. I have a book
Oh,
called
yeah.
Mastering the Art of Stress, and I have 52 because it's my favorite number, and it's the number of weeks in a year. Modalities, which again, 99% of it is free. Just
Nice.
recommendations that have really, really helped me. And like I start my day every day with movement and music, and
Mm-hmm.
music throughout my life, whether I'm sad or happy, it's my
Mm-hmm.
go-to, and it really truly can change. I mean, there's science behind this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, musicians have bigger brains because like you're just using different parts of your brains.
Yes.
And even just thinking positively, I always say if you want to have a positive life, think positive thoughts, because we literally can only have one thought in our brain at a time. So if you catch yourself in a cycle of ruminating or obsessing about something, gratitude has been transformative to me, absolutely
You,
transformative to me.
yeah, gratitude, you can't be unhappy and be grateful at the same time.
Right. And it's just crazy. Like I can, we were talking, before, like that my eyes are swollen because I was having, great releases crying. When I do my
Nice.
gratitude rituals, I cry, and it's not because I'm sad. It's because it's a release.
It's a release.
And, we're told as a society, don't cry, stop
Yeah.
crying. And when we cry, we release cortisol, we decrease cortisol production, we release endorphins, which are our natural painkillers,
Mm-hmm.
and oxytocin, like the love hormone. So we just need to get back to basics. Like I said, my
Yes.
philosophy is called "Keep It Simple, Sweetheart." I have another book that's going to come out. Hugs, not drugs. I'm like, don't underestimate. The day-to-day things that we can do to just be happier and healthier and more harmonious. Like I think in the United States, particularly, we tend to overcomplicate things because we want instant gratification and we want it now. And we'd rather take a pill or something, which we'd rather numb ourselves than resolve the things. And again, I repressed and suppressed, for decades. So I say this with all the love in my heart that I
Yeah.
want people to understand that they don't have to do that because, again, even though I was happy all my life, I wasn't at peace, and I was in bad relationships, and I wasn't living life the way I wanted to. I wasn't in a career that I wanted to be in. I had maladaptive coping mechanisms, since
Mm-hmm.
childhood. And, so if
Yep.
anyone's struggling, whether they're aware of issues or if they have behaviors that are puzzling to themselves that they would like to change, because
Mm-hmm.
we can't think of our way out of those things, we can't.
No.
We have to get to the subconscious level. Another thing that's helped me a lot is affirmations, which I used to think was nonsense and silliness and manifestations, and just stand. I thought it was like a Saturday Night Live skit. Stand in front of a mirror and I'm happy and I'm wealthy, and all of a
And
sudden
it's
I get a
so
huge check.
uncomfortable when you start.
Yes, yes. But self-awareness is a prerequisite because it's a prerequisite for letting things go. Because if we don't know what it is that we need to let go, we're never going to
Right.
be able to address it. And then changing you realize what you want to change, and beliefs and thoughts underlie the behaviors. So if you want different behaviors, you have to tackle it, at the beliefs and thoughts, which requires you to get to your subconscious, which, meditation helps with that.
Mm-hmm.
Hypnosis helps with that. I actually got certified in hypnosis because, and again, there's so many free resources on YouTube. And if anybody, wants any suggestions, recommendations, I'm happy to provide that. But I had been listening to a lot of, hypnosis videos, and
Mm.
sometimes they were triggering me because it'd be like, oh, you're calm and you're in a canoe and you go to this isolated cabin. I'm like, I have abandonment wounds. I don't want to be alone in the dark in a
Oh,
cabin,
right.
So I'm like, no, that
Yeah.
doesn't work for me. So I did it so that I could do like self hypnosis because I understand myself very well. But you want to get to that brain wave to where you can access your subconscious and that you can change those underlying beliefs and thoughts. Like I said, I had always treated myself. I'd always, believed I was a means to an end. And so I was going to continue being treated as a means to an end because that's what I was projecting. That was my worth. I'd have an existential crisis if I were alone because if I'm not needed, I'm meaningless.
Ooh, boy.
Yes,
I can relate to that.
yes. And, the way that we live our lives, if you have those negative limiting beliefs, that is not the way to live. And most of us
Mm-hmm.
don't even realize that we have it. And that's where, the self-awareness really comes in.
Right, right. Yeah, I've said over and over. And even when I do my workshop, one of the first things that we're going to learn about is self-awareness, because you need the self-awareness to catch everything. You need the self-awareness to listen to your body, to the thoughts that are going through your mind, how you're feeling, how you're reacting to others, how others are reacting to you. Without self-awareness, you're going to miss all that. I mean, and again, when you're in survival mode, you can't have self-awareness. You're just living
Right.
for the next moment.
Yeah, you really are. And, we had talked before about, perceptions and misperceptions and filtering things through your trauma lens. And, Buddhism will say that 95% of suffering is from misperceptions. And, once I was cognizant of that, I do realize that we're self-imposing a lot of stress and trauma on ourselves
Yes.
because of that. And I'm sure it's happened with your husband. Like you could be thinking something and he'd be like, how could you possibly be thinking
Yes.
that, And it's because of those underlying beliefs that we're carrying. And again, you can't just think yourself out of those. You can't.
No.
Sorry.
I was just going to say that there's also those thoughts where, and I had this actually happen the other day, where, an interaction happens between you and someone, and you start ruminating of where you're going with it, and and you start making up these stories and going down this road. And I caught myself doing that. I'm like, whoa, hang on, time out. Why am I going down this road? This is, because that road took me to hours and hours of misery.
Yes.
And I caught myself going down that road of making up all these stories out of something, there's like this one little thing that happened, and I started to create this huge story out of it.
We catastrophize.
Yes. And I caught myself and I'm like, wow, where did that come from? And I stopped it. And boy, I'll tell you, not only was I aware that I was thinking that, but the way my body felt was horrible.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Horrible.
Yes. And, I think also like learning about the trauma psyche and delving into this stuff, it also helps make you a more compassionate, understanding individual.
Yes.
Like one of my last most significant relationships, I definitely had the anxious attachment style and he had the avoidant attachment style. And so
that's what we're attracted to.
Yeah. So, he would need space, and of course that triggered my abandonment wounds, and I was only thinking about it from my perspective, not from his. And he would want space if something was wrong, which struck fear into my heart. And he actually came up with a great compromise when we would have an issue. He would say, like, let's go walk together and be quiet, So Aww. The walking together was his compromise. The being quiet was my compromise. But it showed me that, he wasn't leaving me. It wasn't an abandonment, etc. And so having those insights helps us because, emotional regulation, and most of us who have had trauma have dysregulation. And emotional regulation not only helps you with your external expression of your feelings, vis-a-vis your relationships, etc., but, very importantly, it helps you with your internalized experience of that, like that pain and that fear and that shame and everything else that we feel. And so that's a huge tool to cultivate, because it can make you feel much better and it can make your relationships much better. That's actually why I got certified as a heart coherence coach, because, it teaches you those kinds of things. And a lot of it's from childhood. Like I took all of the maladaptive coping mechanisms and saw the emotional dysregulation. My father was like temper tantrum and my mom numbed herself. And again, that's what we learn. If you don't learn healthy coping mechanisms, a lot of us are doing those maladaptive coping mechanisms. And, whether it's overeating or undereating or drinking too much or gambling or shopping addiction or hoarding, so many of those things are related to unresolved things. And people who do those things, like, we don't want to do those things. We don't even understand why we're doing them.
But they're doing them for a reason. And that's what I say is people do things for a reason. You don't just wake up one day and do some kind of behavior just out of the blue for no reason whatsoever.
Right.
You may not know why you're doing it, but there is definitely a reason. And that should be enough of an alert for you. Like, one of the things that helped me with my triggers, realizing when I was triggered, because I was triggered all the time. So I didn't realize, I felt like I was triggered all the time, but it was just watching my reaction to a situation. because I could see that my reaction is so over the top.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't line up with how I should respond to this situation. And I'm watching the person on the other side of me looking at me like, what's going on here? Like, this is, and so that was like, and, for several years I carried that and didn't know what it was. And it was just so humiliating to walk away. But then again, once I started to have the self-awareness, and that was the cue, is like, okay, wait a minute. My reaction to this is a little bit over the top, and I can tell because the person across from me is looking at me like that. And I used to run away from, and be shameful of that. But it was just one of the things that made me aware and made me dive deeper.
Yes, and you hit it on the head when you said reaction. We'd rather respond, from a centered, stable place than
Correct.
react. And when we're triggered, you literally can't stop yourself because the part of your brain that is responsible for foresight, it's shut off. It's shut off. So you're just in pure survival mode. You cannot, and I know that feeling in your body. You can't do anything about it. Like, words can be coming out of your mouth, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to regret this.
It's like these words bypass your brain.
They do,
right?
Right, because you're in your primal brainstem.
Right,
you're in your primal brainstem. You are not in your cortex, your thinking brain, and that's why things like heart coherence and learning emotional regulation, which that's something that I think is fundamental that we should all be taught, and the world would be a much different place.
I know. It's almost like this stuff should be taught in school, especially emotional regulation. Let's teach our kids at such a young age, as soon as we can. Yes. Teach them how to self-regulate themselves.
Yes.
And not shut them down when they're crying. Find out what's going on. Teach them to have a voice, because the thing we have to remember, and I know this was true for me until I got a voice, is that it's hard to articulate, right? So we can't expect children to articulate. And when we shut that voice down, because I will tell you from my own experience, when my voice got shut down, and all the way into my adult life, when my voice would get shut down, I couldn't articulate. When someone would finally give me the space to say what it is I needed to say, it would make no sense. Yeah. It made complete sense here, but getting from here to here wouldn't work. And it was just because it felt like my throat got constricted. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your questions about this episode, or really anything that has to do with trauma. So you can comment below, or you can reach out to me at asklisatickle@gmail.com. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you.
And a lot of us, when things happen to us, we're too young to be able to articulate. It's funny when you said that your throat felt constricted. I was told I had esophagitis all my life. I had food allergies. I ended up in the emergency room, had a number of invasive procedures because of that. It felt like, I don't know if it's called peach pit. It feels like you have a pit in your throat and you literally can't swallow. And
it hurts.
Yes. I mean, it feels like a heart attack at times.
It does.
And craniosacral therapy, part of that was, parts of it were uncomfortable because of my different experiences. And fortunately, I had a really good rapport. Just like with anything else, you have to have a rapport with the particular person who's doing it. But she, did something in my mouth, and that's when I started to find my voice, and that's actually why I named my book Roar. Finding your voice. Collectively finding our voice is so. Yeah, it's crazy how much this stuff impacts us, and I'm just glad that there's more awareness about it, and trauma-informed care and people. There's the book, again, because I want people to understand, not just the people, and probably most of us, honestly, have been traumatized, but the people who love us, who, want to interact with us. The book by Dr. Perry and Oprah Winfrey, What Happened to You, instead of what's wrong with you. Just having a completely different perspective. And, we need less judgment in this world and more compassion and understanding. And I think the more that people appreciate it, because again, our behaviors are, an enigma to ourselves. And so I think we also owe it to society to help others understand, what happens with the trauma psyche. Like your, amygdala, your emotional center, your fear center, literally grows while your, hippocampus, your memory, and your cortex, they're shrinking. So it literally is changing your brain structure.
Yeah,
but we have
absolutely.
neuroplasticity, and we can change that.
And we can bring it back. Yeah. So the thing that is so I find so encouraging is, yeah, we're dealing with all this trauma and we are going to be on our healing journey until we take our last breath. I truly believe that. But there are so many great modalities out there now that not only help us manage our trauma, but actually heal from it, actually
Yes.
overcome parts of it and be empowered. And we learn how to manage our trauma and when we the effects of the trauma when it comes up instead of it managing us. And the nice thing
Yes.
is as you're on your healing journey, it does get easier. It does get easier to manage this stuff because it's not, in the beginning it's overwhelming. In the beginning it's so much, you're learning so much and you're getting triggered and the beginning is really tough.
Mm-hmm.
But hang in there because it hang in there and keep doing it because it does get easier. It doesn't mean that you're never going to get triggered. It doesn't mean that you're never going to have down days, but it doesn't take you out like it used to. Like
Right. It doesn't control your life, and most
it
importantly,
doesn't.
your behaviors.
Right.
You're not literally shackled to it anymore, where every belief, thought, and behavior is dictated by it. And even
Yeah.
us being able to speak about it, I think we're speaking about it as our history, not our story. Like when I started writing, I said
Correct.
not only was I authoring books, but I was authoring my life now because trauma. I speak from transformation now, not from trauma. It's not
Correct.
running the show anymore.
Right. It's not, yeah, it's not controlling your not life anymore. And that's what's so empowering. And when I think back before I realized this and just how I felt, and I just felt helpless and hopeless and,
Mm-hmm.
and just exhausted all the time. And all I wanted to do was get better. I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to hurry up and get better. I was sick of feeling the way I felt, thinking the way, and there's so much of it I didn't even understand. And so there's a lot of hope out there. I think over the last probably 20 years, we've really come a long way with learning about trauma, understanding trauma, getting the help out there. There's certainly a lot more that needs to be done.
Right. I mean, I think that, especially nowadays, things are so accessible. And I love, a podcast like yours because you really are. It's not like we're sitting here commiserating about our traumas. We're trying to
No.
help educate, inspire, empower people. And, guests that you have on, like, Tim Fletcher, who I'd always followed
Hmm.
on Instagram. I mean, listening to those people, because so many of us who have trauma, we just don't understand what's happening. We know that something's off
Right.
and something's wrong. And instead of just people, being identified with it. Like I actually called myself the Naked Conqueror because I'm very raw and vulnerable and sharing because I want people to understand. Don't be embarrassed. Like I recount stuff that I'm not proud of, but that's your
Yeah.
expressions of the will to survive. Those things served us
Hmm.
before. And so you need to accept those instead of rejecting those and your pain in order to like
Giving
fully
yourself
integrate and be
grace.
whole. Exactly. And so you're actually sharing with people, not only making them feel, seen and heard and like they're not alone, but actual practical things that they can do. They can start understanding and find resources to heal. And I think that it's within our power. And like you said, it's so empowering to realize that. So empowering because anyone who has unresolved trauma, they might not even understand or realize all the ways it's impacting them. And that's why I share.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
behavioral. It was my numbing behaviors. It
Yes.
was not living my fullest life. I was just biding
Yep.
time. I attempted suicide twice, which,
Mm.
now that I understand it, when you are outsourcing your worth, um,
Hmm.
you are hugely triggered. Like the first time I did was in high school, and my sister, and it took me forever to realize it. My sister was no longer sleeping in the same room, and I was petrified because when I was alone, bad things happen. And then the
Hmm.
next time in adulthood, I had a boyfriend who, thank God, he was leaving me because like I shouldn't have been with him. But if he left, I was meaningless because my worth
Yes.
was giving. And
Yeah.
even articulate that, and like reading and writing has also been really helpful for me. Like throughout my life, I was always into books and inspirational heroes like Helen Keller and Nelson Mandela and people who take adversities and they come out the other side stronger.
Hmm.
And then writing, like, people would suggest just journaling. And I'm like, what good is that? I'm just going to be wallowing in my pain. Why would I be like staring at it, But it actually scientifically, it's different. It's even different than talk therapy because you really do help release yourself. And
Hmm.
writing my memoir, whether somebody just wants it to journal or if they actually want to write a story or whatever, it was my healing journey,
Yeah.
live. It was very cathartic. And so
Yeah.
I highly recommend that as well.
I've heard that so many times because I've had many, many authors and many people who've done their memoir, and they say the same thing. And it was hard. It was very difficult for them to go through it. But boy, when they were done, it
Yeah.
was very much a healing journey for them.
It's funny. I did the when I was first writing, it was kind of clinical. I was trying to use my intelligence to heal, and then when I was editing, it was like super emotional, and I started doing different affirmations. And again, I'm an introvert, and I have a couple of YouTube channels, and I started videoing myself doing the affirmations because you can see the release, with me crying, and I just want people to realize it's not sadness, it's a release. But when I would articulate, I would say I no longer have to perform or betray myself. When I articulated it, it was just, to me, I'm like, oh my God, this is what I have been doing all my life. And to just say it helped me acknowledge it and then release it. And so it's really transformative.
And I know for me, and probably some of our listeners, they get worried that, oh God, if I start crying, I'm not going to stop. I used to be so worried about that. And that's not true. That's not true. You need to cry. You need to cry.
Right. It's you're not wallowing, you're releasing. You really are.
Exactly.
And then writing, I have my novel series, which is based on my life, but it's still a healing journey. And I wrote my things under a pen name to protect my family, and my family ended up finding out, and half my family disowned me. And so in my novel series, that was also cathartic because it's kind of like my aspirational healing. And I have my parents died in a car accident in the novel because like I'm mourning them even though they're still alive. And then
right,
like if I got rid of all my memories from my life, from bad things, I would have no memories. So even in the book, like I highlight the things that I love and appreciate about my parents because it wasn't my choice to disconnect from them.
Yeah.
And that's cathartic. I mean, it's crazy. Just simple things, deceptively simple things can have such a positive, huge impact on us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you're right. Writing is a big thing too. I've found when I sit down and I write I journal some, but I'm a letter writer. I'll write letters. I don't send them, but I write letters, and it's just such a huge release. And I just write down whatever is going on in my head, and that's been such a huge release.
And talking about triggering, I used to be the first one. I always said I should have a breathalyzer on my devices. Like I'd have a drink and then like I'd start sending out this stuff and then regret it later. So then I started writing them to get it out, but not sending them.
Yes. Yeah. That's the thing is I have found, and I've actually recommended this with people, like, sometimes you want to, like, one of the things I've done is working with forgiving people who are here and who aren't here. Right. Mm-hmm, so the ones that aren't here anymore, often people think, oh, I won't know how to forgive them or work through that. And you just do it with writing to them.
Mm-hmm.
And of course you can't send it, but even those in my life that I've had to work through some stuff, I just write them a letter, and I'm telling you, I write exactly how I'm feeling at the moment, bad words and all. And then I either burn it or I tear it up or put it in the shredder. And I feel so much better because that stuff's not bouncing around in my brain anymore.
Yeah, it is amazing how helpful that is. Just write, and I know that there is science behind that.
There is.
Writing it, literally helps you get it out and move on. And I think, saying your piece.
Yeah. Because one thing that I call another thing is a brain dump. And what I use this for is when I'm, kind of ruminating on something, I can't quite figure it out. Try this. Just write what's in your brain. Don't even sit and think about what you're writing, and then read it out loud. Mm-hmm. Wow. Is that a big one? Mm-hmm. And you'll be shocked. You will be shocked at what is in there that's coming out. And when you're reading it, that you'll be shocked.
Well, and I think, with writing my memoir, that was so integral to my self-awareness because
I bet.
It was through that writing that I said, oh, I've been Pinocchio all my life. I didn't realize that. And even in my novel, I have a little girl that I have complete adoration. The protagonist has complete adoration for this little girl. And it was midway through writing the series, I was like, that's little me. That's my inner
Oh,
child.
wow.
Yeah. And so now I'm starting a not-for-profit named after that little girl. And it's just like full circle. It's
Yeah.
but if you don't, I think it's that coming, come to terms when you're writing it and you're seeing things on paper that really makes you confront it while simultaneously releasing it. And so it's hugely therapeutic. But again,
It's just real.
yeah,
It's
I had been
real.
like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that at all. That's crazy. And
Yeah.
it's changed my life.
Yeah. No, it was profound for me as well. So, one of the questions I have for you though is what parts of your healing journey were the most unexpected, either in pain or in power?
I think it's funny because it took me so many years to realize that I even needed to heal. And the thing that was the
Yeah.
most empowering and surprising to me was once I actually committed to doing the work, that it was relatively easy and simple. And again, I
Yeah.
have my bad days and everything else, but
Sure.
I think so many people like me would rather repress and suppress, thinking that they don't want to confront it. And I would much rather confront it and go through that than continue to have the overhang and be shackled to my trauma. And again, I had approached it kind of clinically to start with. And once I understood how things worked,
Yeah.
that helped me a lot. So I was kind of using intelligence for the healing. And then I got the feeling through the writing and the releasing. And so I think so many of us don't know what to do.
Hmm.
People would be like, sit with your pain and process. I'm like, well, that sounds stupid to me. I'm like
That's,
gonna go move to Greece or whatever.
yeah.
But it's you if you repress it, it's still there, and I think that that's the biggest learning experience. And so that was definitely my aha. And I'm not belittling the work that it takes. And, again, if you watch my YouTube things, you see me, crying and whatnot. And it's an ongoing process. But I think that facing it and embracing it is the way to go so that you're
Hmm.
not quagmired in the after effects of trauma for the rest of your life. And, I just, like you, I'm trying to share with people because I want to help children. I get
Yeah.
really emotional when I talk about it,
Yes.
but those children that we aren't helping, become adults like me.
Exactly.
And I firmly believe that the rest of my life is going to be the best of my life, and I want to help educate, inspire, empower other people to get to that point way earlier in life than I did.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Get it, nip it in the bud so they don't have to live so many years with suffering and pain. And I think one of the things also that people think about and maybe are afraid of starting the healing process is it does feel really huge and big and overwhelming and scary,
Right, and I think
right?
that's why I say it was shockingly easy and simple, not to belittle it. And
Correct.
and I'm very blessed. When we have trauma, we can go either way. I think we get closed off and scared.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can either be overly cautious or reckless. I
Yeah.
veered
Yeah.
more towards the reckless. Like I used to always
Hmm.
say, live and learn. And my best friend who made me go to therapy said, "Can you please start learning instead of living so much?" I'm like, "Well, living's so
Yeah.
much more fun." Um, but
Yeah.
but I've always had an open heart, so I've had a lot of love, and it's come with a lot of heartache. But I know other people are so guarded that they don't
Yeah.
even open their hearts, and
Yeah.
so I feel like that's why I've had a relatively happy full life. And so the people who are closed off, those are the ones who probably struggle the most with starting
Hmm.
down that healing journey. And I think that they have the greatest opportunity, to benefit from it. Because I mean, to me, we're here to love. And,
Yeah.
again, now that love, I'm trying to have that include the self love. And people, we're kind of taught, like self and selfish, et cetera. And, personally, my love is limitless. I can, love myself unconditionally from here till kingdom come. And it doesn't mean that I have any less compassion or love for anyone else around me.
Correct.
It's
Right.
limitless. It's
It
not one or the other.
expands. It
Yes, yes.
expands.
And
Hmm.
trauma shrinks us and disconnects us, and
Correct.
healing connects us and
It
expands us. And
expands. Yes.
coherent communities, and when we heal and things like with heart coherence, not only does it help you, but we literally radiate that energy around us. Like I was always,
Hmm.
puppies and babies, were always drawn to me. I always had positive energy, and I'm blessed to have that positive energy despite the things that have happened.
Correct.
And
yes.
So when we heal, we help the world heal. I mean, I honestly believe that.
Exactly. Oh, I'm 100% with you as well. So there was something you wanted to read to the listeners.
Yeah, I think that both of us are on a mission to let people know that healing is possible and that not alone. So this is an excerpt from Roar, my memoir, and I love quotes, inspirational quotes. And the first quote is, "They tried to bury us; they didn't know we were seeds." And my best friend always called me Sprout, which I've definitely been sprouting. So this is from an excerpt from one of my chapters, and it's called "You Are Not Alone," which again I think is our mission to let people know. One of the worst things about abuse is feeling like you're all alone, like you're suffocating incomprehensibly in solitude, in an endless loop of incredible confusion and pain, like something is wrong with you, off. Particularly if you endured childhood abuse at the hands of a primary caretaker, you likely confided in no one. If the people who are supposed to love you and take care of you hurt you, to whom do you confide? Whom can you possibly trust? These are questions that are too overwhelming for a little mind to comprehend. Indeed, when you are abused by a caregiver, it's difficult to understand the gravity of the abuse or the incredibly evil nature of it. It's what you know. It's your own little world. It's what's being modeled to you as normal. You know you are terrified and that you don't want any part of it, but you don't have the faculties to appreciate the abusive nature of it. You have nothing to compare it to, and you're extraordinarily confused and conflicted. So what does your wise brain do when it's confronted with something too horrific, too terrifying, too much to handle? It often makes you disassociate, so your mind doesn't have to consciously endure what your body is suffering, and you frequently repress it. You're in survival mode. It's no wonder that survivors of childhood abuse have little to no memories from childhood. These powers to disassociate or disconnect and to repress seem like almost superpower powers at the time, enabling you to get through the petrifying events. When you are too confused, conflicted, or scared to divulge the abuse, it exacerbates the harm and makes it less likely you will confide in anyone, seek help, or even remember. These likely circumstances are obviously and sadly counterproductive to healing. Unfortunately, there's also often a stigma associated with the abuse itself, whether societally or self-imposed. When we know something is wrong and has to be kept a secret, we feel shame, if not outright guilt. It's incredibly difficult for a child to comprehend that he or she is not responsible for his or her so-called participation. We generally don't benefit from an exculpatory no, which can translate into an erroneous but incredibly uncomfortable feeling of being voluntarily complicit. This adds a great deal of confusion to the situation. Even if we manage to escape feeling shame with respect to the abuses themselves, we've likely engaged in different survival-type behaviors or coping mechanisms which make us feel weak and out of control. We are ashamed of our natural tendencies to avoid pain. Addictions and substance abuse are coping and numbing behaviors. There are a number of things I've divulged throughout this book of which I was not proud. I understand them now, though, and that gives me the courage to share them in hopes of providing insight into the traumatized psyche to those who have also been abused, as well as to those who struggle to understand us. Throughout my life, I was often an enigma to family, friends, strangers, even myself. My relationships, my numbing behaviors, and certain decisions were irrational to them, indeed often reckless. The overriding tendency to remain silent with our shameful secret is incredibly counterproductive to healing. We individually and collectively need to roar. Healing does not happen in silence or solitude. Exposing abuses to the light of day, so to speak, whether to a friend, a therapist, or even a journal, helps to make it less dark, less scary, and helps pave the way to healing. Sharing your abuse with another helps you be seen, to be heard, to have your feelings validated, and to receive compassion. Talking or writing about how you feel also helps prompt the kind of self-reflection required to become sufficiently aware to identify underlying negative limiting beliefs, unhealthy relationship dynamics, and maladaptive, often destructive coping mechanisms. Childhood abuse is an urgent worldwide crisis with lifelong significant consequences absent intervention. We need to stop allowing it to be a taboo topic. Just because a society is uncomfortable with it or doesn't have all the answers is no excuse to let children and the adults they become continue suffering in silence. We need to give the issue the priority it deserves and the resources necessary to address it. And to my point, I'm grateful for your platform to do that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's so true. You worded that so beautifully.
Thank you.
And I'm sure there's unfortunately so many people that can relate to that. So
and that's what I want. I want people to not feel alone with all my heart.
Right,
And
right.
there is healing.
There is healing. And that is probably the biggest thing that happens with trauma is we feel alone, ashamed, full of shame and alone. And the shame
helpless
isolates us even more.
Right.
Right? We don't speak about it because there's shame, but we're not supposed to be carrying shame. And I remember when I had Tim Fletcher on my podcast and I asked him about shame, and I'm telling you, this was powerful. I asked him, I said, why in the world do we carry shame when we are the victims? Why are the perpetrators not carrying the shame? And he said, basically, and this is so true, it made me stop and pause. Shame is the set of beliefs we have about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We change the beliefs that we have about ourselves, and the shame goes away. And when he said that, I like quickly scanned my life, and I can see where absolutely the shame shut my mouth. And I was like, okay, so I don't think that way anymore because the beliefs I have about myself are different. So he's 100% right. That's all it is.
And that's where the self-awareness and change in the beliefs, that's why that's crucial. And we all have that power. We have that power, thank God with the neuroplasticity.
Right.
And that's why, we're both encouraging people to go down that path so that we can kind of help shed a light on, getting through that dark tunnel. And, and that's why I made a point of saying it was way easier to embrace it and go down that instead of continuing to have trauma dictate my life.
Because the beautiful thing is, on the other side of that is a whole new life, is freedom, is peace, is joy, is true, deep happiness. So much of that, that we didn't have when we were sitting there being oppressed. And I don't know, I felt trapped in my trauma.
And it's kind of like I said, I've come full circle. It's almost like you're back to that authentic inner child.
Correct.
To be a teacher and a psychologist, and children are happy and playful and innocent, and they don't usually lack self-worth unless something was programmed in them. And we all need to kind of become more childlike, if you will.
Definitely.
And then again, that co-regulates. So every time anyone heals, that also helps everyone around them.
Exactly, because what affects us affects everybody.
Yes. I mean, we
definitely
are, vibing off of everyone's energy.
Right.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
Misery loves company, and everyone says that, and I say happiness loves company. So,
happiness definitely loves company. Yeah, definitely. Like-minded. Yeah, exactly. So I've got one last question for you. What do you want to leave our listeners with?
Definitely that you are not alone, that healing is possible. You need to turn inward, stop looking externally. Like I had a rainbow of narcissists throughout my life, and it wasn't until I turned internally, why was I with the narcissist? It really doesn't matter what's going on with the narcissist. It's why I keep repeating this pattern. Cry, laugh, hug, smile. We have a bidirectional communication between our brains and our hearts, and we smile when we're happy, but literally smiling helps us feel happy. It's effective. So it's those little things, deceptively simple. And there's so many resources out there, ebooks and YouTube and podcasts like yours. And I'm happy for anyone to reach out to me. And I'm more than happy to share, what helped me, the free or pretty much inexpensive modalities that help me heal, because they are transformational.
Well, why don't you share with the listeners how they can reach out to you? We'll have this in the show notes, but why don't you tell them how, if they wanted to reach out to you, how they could connect with you?
My website's probably the best way, mediterraneanme.org, and then that has my email and, my social media links, etc.
Perfect. Okay. Well, Sophia, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for reading that part of your book.
Sorry, I was a little emotional.
No, don't apologize. No, this is a safe space. Tears, anger, anything can come out here. So no, don't feel bad. It shows the passion of your heart, and that is a big thing. Is so many of us have felt alone, and we're not. We don't have to be alone. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I appreciate that, and I appreciate all you're doing. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.